Something happened inside that Cleveland facility this week that nobody is saying out loud yet, and I'm going to say it. 3 days of OTAs just wrapped up. And before you scroll past this thinking you've already seen the takes, let me stop you right there. Because what I watched unfold across those 3 practice sessions wasn't a quarterback competition playing out on schedule. It was a franchise standing at a genuine fork in the road, and most people covering it are too invested in the comfortable version of the story to tell you what the fork actually looks like. So let's do this right. Shedeur Sanders walked into Cleveland carrying an avalanche of noise, arm strength debates, velocity critiques, guys pulling up Colorado tape like they personally lined up against him with a radar gun. I heard every word of it. I let it sit, and then I watched every rep I could physically access from these 3 OTA sessions. And here's what I actually see, not what the algorithm wants me to confirm, not what the pre-written narrative is waiting to validate. This kid throws with touch. And I don't mean that as a compliment wrapped inside a polite caveat. I mean it as a statement about genuine football rarity. Real touch, the kind that arrives. The kind where a receiver doesn't have to contort his body to adjust on a crossing route at full speed. The kind that drops into the bucket on time, at the right angle, in the precise window only the intended man can access. You cannot coach that into someone. You can refine it. You can scheme around the absence of it. But you cannot install it from scratch. And Shedeur Sanders walked into the Cleveland Browns facility with it already running in his system. There was one throw to Carson Ryan, the rookie tight end out of BYU, that I rewound 4 or 5 times. Nothing about it makes a highlight reel. No crowd noise. No dramatic moment attached to it. Just a perfectly weighted, perfectly timed professional football throw that told me something essential about how this 22-year-old understands what a player needs in a given moment. Not what the play diagram drew up. Not what the coordinator scripted. What that man right there in that exact spot on that exact route needed the ball to do. That separation between players who produce circus moments and players who win you real games in real weather with real stakes. That throw lived right in that gap. And the chemistry developing out there is the part that really locked my attention in. Early spring installation is supposed to be messy. You're building vocabulary from scratch with people who barely know each other's tendencies. The connections that form organically in these early sessions before the full playbook is open, before reps have created real muscle memory. Those tell you something true. And what kept developing naturally, not because it was scripted, but because a quarterback was genuinely feeling the rhythm of a real offense, was Shedeur to Tylan Wallace and Shedeur to Carson Ryan. 2 completely different players, 2 different areas of the field, 2 different skill profiles, and he found both of them repeatedly in ways that didn't look like execution. They looked like instinct.
Here's what makes that even more significant. Harold Fannin wasn't out there. The tight end Shedeur built a genuine 2-man connection with last season. The guy who made that offense genuinely hard to scheme against was not on that field. And Shedeur was still generating real, visible, organic chemistry with players he barely knows yet. When your most trusted weapon is unavailable and your quarterback is still operating with authority rather than just surviving the install period, that tells you more than any individual throw can. That's a quarterback who doesn't need perfect conditions to function. There was also a small moment involving Justin Jefferson, the rookie linebacker out of Alabama, that most people will completely miss because it gets buried inside the bigger storylines. But this is exactly the kind of detail that carries the most actual weight. Day 1, Jefferson gets his hand in on Carson Ryan during a route, disrupts the timing, kills the play. Nothing dramatic. No visible frustration. Day 2, same route, same matchup. Ryan comes down with the football. No fanfare. No celebration. Just a problem that existed on Tuesday, quietly solved on Wednesday. That is a quarterback and a receiver compressing the learning curve under real competitive pressure. That's accelerated trust being built in real time. Most people watching this spring will never notice that. I cannot stop thinking about it. Now I have to go somewhere harder. And I want to be clear, I'm not going to let prior narrative write my analysis for me. What I see from Deshaun Watson in these OTAs is a quarterback throwing the football well. Genuinely well. The mechanics look clean. The release looks healthy. His body is doing things I honestly did not expect to see given the road this man has traveled. When you watch a quarterback coming back from serious injury, and we are talking about a man who has now torn both Achilles, which is a sentence I still struggle to process as a football reality. The first thing you look for has nothing to do with arm talent. You're looking for the body protecting itself. A back foot that plants half an inch short. A follow-through that pulls at the end. A release that comes a beat early because some deep part of the nervous system is still negotiating with rebuilt tissue. I watched Watson closely for all of that. I am not seeing it. When he steps into a throw right now, he steps into it like a man who has finished his private conversation with doubt and is now just throwing the football. The crossbody delivery to Isaiah Bond, away from the frame, across his body, with velocity and placement, that is a throw you cannot fake. A quarterback quietly protecting his body does not make that delivery look casual. Watson made it look routine. So here is the honest statement. Deshaun Watson in a controlled, clean environment, no live rush, helmets and shorts, mid-May, looks like a capable NFL quarterback. And I said months ago that Watson might be better at performing in this specific setting than almost anyone in the league. He has lived through more spring installations than most quarterbacks ever will. He spent an entire year on the sideline doing nothing but healing, studying, and mentally preparing for exactly this moment. Of course, he looks sharp right now. I built that expectation months ago. But the Watson conversation cannot only live in clean conditions. And anyone who lets it stay there is being dishonest with you. We are talking about a 30-year-old quarterback who has appeared in fewer than a third of his team's games since the league moved to 17. $33 million per year, fully guaranteed. And he has been available for less than a third of the Sundays that contract was meant to cover. Shoulder reconstruction, 2 Achilles tears, a pattern of physical setbacks stretching back further than most people want to trace. At some point, and I say this without hostility, just with clear eyes, this stops reading as misfortune and starts reading as something identifiable. Jimmy Haslam is not a man who absorbs that financial weight without eventually demanding something real in return. The pressure on Watson isn't just to throw the ball well in May. It's to exist on a football field in October when the standings mean something and the margin for error is gone. Just getting started. The media narrative is starting to settle on Watson having the lead. I want to address that directly. A lead in May, in a setting without live pass rushers, without pads, without fourth-quarter pressure that reveals the true architecture of a quarterback's composure. That is a data point. It has always been a data point. And treating it as something larger than that requires either a serious lack of historical context or a conclusion that was reached before the evidence was even collected. Because what the competitive record actually shows about Deshaun Watson when real pressure arrives, when the pocket collapses and the rush comes free and he has to hold the ball and trust his body and deliver into a tight window while contact is incoming, is a recognizable pattern. The feet getting active before the contact even materializes. Movement triggered by a threat the body hasn't fully accepted yet. That is a mental scar from injury, not a technique problem. And the question these OTAs cannot answer is whether that scar has closed enough to stay buried when a 300-pound edge rusher is coming off the blind side in late October with playoff implications hanging over everything. Shedeur Sanders does not carry that scar. He is 22 years old. And when he walks to that huddle, the freshness and that confidence is visible even through practice footage. Todd Monken is not going to keep the temperature comfortable to protect feelings. This is a coach who calls things embarrassing when they're embarrassing and gets louder when the execution doesn't match the standard. And Shedeur is operating inside that demanding environment with a composure that is not performance. It's just who he actually is in a football context. Mary Kay Cabot was saying last year that his pre-snap processing wasn't ready for NFL-level complexity. She came out of day 3 of these OTAs with a noticeably different tone. Said the quarterbacks were doing well in the install. said things looked efficient. That shift doesn't come from a reporter deciding to be generous. It comes from something on the field earning a different observation. Now, the interceptions. The internet ran with them the way it always does. The picks we've seen across these 3 days have been deflections, tipped balls, multi-contact physics chaos that tells you absolutely nothing meaningful about a quarterback's decision-making. They are noise. But the reaction to the interceptions is not noise. When Shedeur threw one, it was everywhere within minutes. Clipped, posted, analyzed, amplified. When Watson threw one, people were literally conducting forensic analysis on practice footage, cross-referencing the color of shorts different quarterbacks were wearing in different clips just to establish basic attribution. Think about what that behavior is actually telling you. It tells you that a portion of the audience has correctly understood that the content being released is curated. What's going viral and what's being observed by journalists physically standing on that field with grass on their shoes watching every rep. Those are two entirely different data streams. And they do not always point in the same direction. 3 days of OTAs don't resolve anything. They never have. But what accumulates across those days, the patterns forming, the connections being built, the problems getting quietly solved, that's real signal. And the signal I'm reading right now is Shedeur Sanders building something inside this offense that does not require perfect conditions to function. Something that isn't waiting on a medical clearance. Something that isn't sitting on top of rebuilt tissue hoping the foundation holds when the real weight gets applied. 1 week of this spring session remains. And every rep from here into training camp, every training camp snap into preseason, every preseason moment into the actual season, all of it is compressing toward the hardest decision this front office has faced in years, maybe longer. Because the real question sitting in the middle of that facility right now is not which quarterback looked better in May. The real question is what kind of franchise Cleveland actually wants to be. Whether the people in that building are going to make the decision that matches what their eyes are genuinely telling them, or the decision that feels institutionally safer because it was made for them 3 years ago by a contract built around something entirely different from winning football games. That question has no easy answer, but it is sitting right there on that practice field. And everybody inside those walls already knows it. If this kind of real, unfiltered Browns analysis is what you're here for, hit that like button, subscribe to Browns Today updates, and stay locked in. Because this story is